Hey guys, Midwest Picker here. Welcome to another episode of Midwest Picker True Stories. If you're new to my channel, this is not a reselling video. That's what I typically do. I do like to do these story videos. Now these are true stories, 100% factual. I was either there when it happened or it happened to me. These are crazy stories from the 80s, 90s. These stories are weird, bizarre, gross, disgusting, just insane. And this story is no different. So back in the early 90s, I worked in the meat department at a small local grocery store. And it was really small, so a lot of the employees were friends. And a lot of times on the weekends or during the week, a lot of us would get together and have activities and do things. It was kind of a big thing in the 90s because there was no internet. We would have euchre parties, that's a card game. We would have bonfire parties, or we would wrench on cars, or we'd just hang out, even just play video games. But we did a lot of different activities. One time we went on a canoe trip, like 50 of us. It was crazy. Maybe I'll do a video on that. I actually made a funny Midwest Picker true story about working in the meat department. It's a little R-rated, not really R-rated, but it's funny. I'll link that down below. So in this video, none of the pictures, none of the names are true or real. I'm going to change the names to protect the privacy. Pictures I just stole off the internet. So one day while I'm working in this grocery store, my friend Mike, not his real name, walked up to me and said that he was invited to go boating on Friday night on Muskegon Lake. Now, if you're not familiar with West Michigan, there are a lot of lakes, a lot of inland lakes that are huge. And Muskegon Lake is the biggest inland lake in West Michigan. He asked me if I wanted to go with him, and if we had time we might even go out to Lake Michigan because it's connected by a channel. And I said, sure, sounds like fun. Sounds like fun. So a lot of my friends and family lived in West Michigan in the general area or Muskegon County, so it was pretty easy to have like a get-together and invite people to go camping, boating, any kind of activity. And I mentioned Lake Michigan. If you're not familiar with Lake Michigan or Lake Superior or Lake Huron, they're basically like small oceans. Lake Michigan is 307 miles long and 118 miles wide, with a shoreline all the way around of 1,640 miles. This thing is massive. Muskegon Lake is obviously smaller, but it's 4,150 acres in size. Muskegon Lake is 5.5 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. It's big. Here is a Google map view of Muskegon Lake. And here's a nice aerial view of Muskegon Lake. My friend Mike didn't own a boat, but his friend Dan did have a boat. And it was Dan's dad who owned a speedboat, and that's the boat that they were going to use to go boating on Friday night on Muskegon Lake. The boat that Dan's dad owned wasn't that big. It would hold about 6 or 8 people, and Dan's dad also had a slip at the marina on Muskegon Lake. So when Dan offered to take Mike boating and told him, invite some friends if you want to, Mike invited 4 more friends, so we had about 6 of us that were going on that Friday night. So Friday night arrives, we go to the store, we buy several 12-packs of beer, we go to the marina, and we show up at the slip to meet Mike and Dan. Now this was around 7 p.m. late in September, so we also had, cold weather gear on. I had like a jacket, long pants. So when you can go boating in Michigan in September, but it's kind of cool out. It can be 50 degrees, 60 degrees, so you have to wear clothes that keep you warm. And it was 7 p.m. so the sun was starting to go down, and it was a Friday night, so we thought, what the heck, we're gonna go out at Muskegon Lake, maybe 2 hours, maybe Lake Michigan, maybe not, and come back, and then probably go back to somebody's house and have a party. The plan was for 6 of us to just cruise out into the middle of Muskegon Lake, drink some beer, listen to some music, just kind of hang out, have fun, maybe go out to Lake Michigan for a few minutes and drive around and then come back, and then head back to the marina. Now, it was kind of cold. If I had to guess, 48, 50 degrees, a little windy. We weren't too concerned because, if it gets too cold, we can always just come back. This would be a great point in the story to mention that boating and drinking is illegal. So we all piled into Dan's dad's speedboat. We started cruising slowly out into the middle of Muskegon Lake, and we were having a blast. We're drinking beer, we're listening to music. The sun is starting to go down. There wasn't hardly any other boats out there, maybe one or two, and they were probably going back to the marina, so we kind of had the lake to ourselves, and we were having a great time. As we moved along at a nice casual slow speed, Mike said to his friend Dan, "Are you sure we have enough gas?" Now I'm going to do my best job to impersonate these guys. Dan seemed kind of annoyed at Mike's question. He was like, "Yeah, I'm sure I got enough gas." Mike said, "But did you check?" And Dan's like, "I don't need to check." Mike and Dan were going back and forth, arguing like an old married couple. It was kind of awkward. I had a bad feeling that Mike had a previous bad experience with Dan in boating and gas in general. So Dan said, "I told my sister 3 days ago to fill the gas tank so I don't need to check it." And then Mike said, "Well, would it hurt to check?" I thought these two were going to start fighting right there in the boat. While these two were arguing back and forth, it happened. The boat motor died, dead center, right in the very middle of Muskegon Lake. The sun was almost down and it was getting really dark. Dan tried several times to turn the key and start the motor. Nothing. No matter what he did, it would not start back up. Now there's several reasons why a boat motor just dies and shuts off. It could be a loose spark plug wire. I mean, I'm not a mechanic, but I know a little bit about lawnmowers. It could be that the motor was flooded and you just have to let it sit for a while before restarting it. Or it could be out of gas. So in the dark, Mike was fumbling around and he found a storage container, like a glove box in the boat, and he opened it up and he found a flashlight and he turned it on. Mike was crawling over us and working his way to the back of the boat where the gas tank is, and he started unscrewing the cap on the gas tank with the flashlight. The whole time Dan was getting ticked and said, "I said we got plenty of gas." Sure enough, Mike opened the cap on the gas tank and shined the flashlight down inside, and that gas tank was bone dry. We had no gas. So now we're stranded in the middle of Muskegon Lake at night, freezing cold, and there is nobody around. We are the only boat out there. Now that we knew the cause of the boat motor dying, we all started thinking out loud of solutions on how we can fix this problem. Somebody said, "Well, maybe we could shout for help." Well, that's not going to work. Nobody's going to hear us. Somebody else said, "Well, maybe we could paddle back to the marina." And Dan said, "Well, that would work if this boat had paddles." Well, we definitely can't swim back. We would die of hypothermia. So this was the early 90s. Nobody had a cell phone. We could have if we had $1,500 to blow, but no, nobody had a cell phone. We had cigarettes, beer, and a flashlight, and that was it. So Mike kind of shined the flashlight towards the dashboard and the steering wheel of the boat. The boat had no radio. So we concluded that we just need to huddle together for warmth and just sit there and float around and wait and hope and pray that some boat comes along to see us. So we kind of all huddled together to keep each other warm. I think one person didn't even have a jacket on. And we had cigarettes and we had beer and we could play music on the radio. But that was it. We just huddled and we waited and we waited. What seemed like an hour had gone by, probably longer, and we were startled by the sound of a loud horn. It was a really loud horn, like you would hear like on an ocean liner. We were looking all around. What is that noise? And we saw in the distance, in the dark, a cargo ship. Yes! Now on Muskegon Lake and Spring Lake and other large lakes, they have channels that go out to Lake Michigan, and often freighters and cargo ships would come into these lakes and they would have cargo like sand or gravel or merchandise. And on this particular night, there was a freighter or cargo ship coming into Muskegon Lake, and we could see it and we could hear it. So this situation was better than nothing, but at night it's kind of hard to tell. We couldn't tell what direction this cargo ship was going. Then we could kind of tell, sort of, that it was heading in our direction. Now that can be good and that can be bad. It's good because maybe we could be rescued. But it was also a bad situation because if it didn't see us, it would possibly hit us and kill us. So as this huge freighter, ocean liner, started heading towards our direction, we knew we were safe, and it started to pass us from about 150 feet away, and it was going really slow. So we all decided we need to yell for help. This may be our only chance of being rescued. So about 20 minutes after we first spotted it, it slowly started passing by us about 150 feet away, and we looked up at the top, and this thing is bigger than a cruise ship. It's massive. We saw like an employee with a hard hat walking on the deck. So we appointed Dan to yell, and Dan yelled, "Hey!" I'm not going to yell because I don't want to blow your ears out. "Hey! We ran out of gas. We need help!" As loud as he could. And then like a miracle, that guy on the deck stopped, turned, and looked in our general direction. He heard Dan. After we saw him do that, we all started yelling for help. This guy on the deck took a few more steps, and he grabbed a spotlight mounted to the railing, and he turned it on and pointed it right at us, and he saw us. We were so excited. Oh my gosh, we started screaming and yelling and waving our arms in this spotlight. Of course, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to look foolish. Then Dan yelled, "We're out of gas. We need help." Then there was a quiet, awkward pause, and the guy on the deck yelled back, "I'll radio for help." Oh my gosh, I felt like I had won the lottery. This wave of relief just went through my whole body. We started cheering and laughing and crying and high-fiving each other. We are saved. He's going to radio for help. We just kept saying, "We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're freezing to death, but we're going to be okay." We stupidly thought some boat would just randomly come along that this guy would radio for and bring us a can of gas, and we would be saved. Well, that's not how life works. The guy in the freighter radioed the Ottawa County Sheriff Marine Patrol. Of course he did. It's better than nothing, I guess. And the freighter just kind of slowly lumbered away towards the marina. We waited for what seemed to be like an hour and a half. And then we saw it, this little speedboat coming in our direction with a spotlight on it, coming right towards us. Yes, we're saved, finally. Woohoo! Our smiles quickly faded as the small boat rolled up next to us, and we realized it was the Ottawa County Sheriff. And this boat had like 3 sheriffs on it, and they rolled up and stopped and turned off their motor and said, "Are you guys in trouble?" As he asked this, he took his flashlight and he could see about 18 empty beer cans on the floor of our boat. We all started talking at the same time about how we ran out of gas, and we thought we had gas, but we didn't have gas, and we're stranded, and we just want to get back to the marina, and we're really sorry, and there's nobody out here, and we saw this freighter, and we don't want to die. We kept emphasizing how cold we were. And then my friend Mike said, "Could you give us some gas?" That's the obvious question, right? Just give us some gas. The sheriff said, "No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a rope to your boat, and I'm going to tow you back to the marina." Oh, crap.
Oh, crap. This was a bad idea. Bad idea. Oh, crap.
So as the sheriffs tied their boat to our boat and very slowly started towing us back to the marina, they asked to see our IDs, all of our IDs. And I swear they must have been going about 3 miles per hour, taking their time very slowly, like a tugboat, taking us back to the marina. I think he had a reason to go very slow. We were assuming the reason was he was going to radio ahead and have police cars waiting for us at the marina so that we can be processed either to go to jail or to get citations, or maybe Dan the driver was going to go to jail. I don't know. We pretty much assumed we were all in trouble, and he was just going super slow to make sure that the police would be there when we arrived at the marina. So during this painfully slow ride back to the marina, we could see one of the sheriffs talking on his radio, giving our names, our date of births, and going back and forth with somebody else, but it was noisy from the boat motor, so we couldn't really tell what was happening. We finally made it back to the marina. We were alive, we were happy, we were freezing cold, but we were just glad to be back. So as we kind of like floated up to the slip at the marina, the sheriffs, they reached down and they untied the ropes and untied their boat from our boat. And then the sheriff said, "Okay, folks, you're free to go. Drive safe." And with that, they slowly lumbered away out into the lake. And we were all like, "What?
What? What?
What did he say? Did he really just say, we're free to go, just drive safe? What?" We kind of sat there in disbelief for like 30 seconds. We wanted to make sure he was really driving away and there was no cops there. We were like, oh my gosh, and we couldn't jump out of that boat fast enough. So Mike and Dan were responsible for getting the truck with the boat trailer to get the boat out of the water. The rest of us, the four of us, we just ran to our cars, started them up, turned the heaters on, and we took off. So that following Monday, I'm at work in the meat department working, and my friend Mike, he comes up to me. He said, hey man, that's what people called me back then. He said, hey man, I figured out why that sheriff let us go Friday night. I said, really? You figured it out? How did you do that? Mike said, remember that guy we used to work with, Scott, from the bakery? I could barely remember anybody named Scott. The guy quit like over a year ago. And Mike said, well, Scott called me Sunday after that incident Friday night. Well, apparently after Scott quit over a year ago, he took some criminal justice classes. And unknown to us, he got hired by the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. Then Scott transferred to the Ottawa County Sheriff's Marine Patrol. And it just so happened that Scott picked up an extra shift working as a dispatcher on a Friday night, the same night that we were stranded out in the middle of the lake. So when the sheriff on the boat called in our names and our date of birth, Scott was on the receiving end of the radio. Now, of course, he had to look us up in the computer to make sure we didn't have warrants. But he took the call and he radioed that information back to the sheriff on the boat that was tied to our boat. And Scott told the sheriff, hey, I know these guys, they're my friends. I used to work with them, they're pretty harmless. The sheriff on the boat radioed back 10-4. And that is the only reason we were allowed to leave. Amazing coincidences that night that our old colleague who had become a cop got a job with the Ottawa County Sheriff. Then he worked for the Marine Patrol. Then he picked up a shift as a dispatcher. And then we were on Muskegon Lake. But then they sent the Ottawa County Sheriff Marine Patrol to pick us up. I don't know if the Muskegon police have a Marine Patrol or not, but that's what happened. It's amazing, amazing coincidence. Now that I think about it, these Midwest Picker stories, I think I've defied death and freezing to death 3 times in my life. Well, that's the story, guys. Not newsworthy. Well, maybe this one, if we went to jail, it'd be on the news. Just another crazy story. I hope you liked it. Give it a thumbs up. If you haven't seen my other Midwest Picker True Stories, there's a playlist. I think it's just called Stories. Some of them are nursing home or medical related. Some of them are crazy. I was arrested at gunpoint at one time with 12 shotguns pointed at my face. The stories are just wild and nuts, but I hope you enjoyed it. Put down in the comments, what would you have done? Would you have freaked out? Have you ever had that experience where you were stranded at night in the middle of a lake? What did you do? How did you get out of that situation? So that's it. Until next time, guys. See ya.